All right, I want you to go with me and just picture for a minute just picture God before creation, before all of it. So I don't even know what this looks like. God's just there. Now, God is perfect, and he's self-sufficient, meaning he doesn't need anything. He's not lacking. There's no deficiency in him. He's not deficient. He's not lacking anything. And he's just there, glorious. And yet, he created us. Like, why is that? What caused him to create us? And he's dwelling there before creation, and at one point, just sitting there in his glory, and out of his glory, out of an overflow of that glory, he creates. Because it was an opportunity. He's seeking to communicate and display who he is through creation. You see, God is glorious, and he created us so that we would know that glory. Isaiah 43 puts it this way: everyone who is called by my name and whom I have created for my glory, whom I have formed, even whom I have made. He's saying right there, everyone, they're here because I made them for my glory. I wanted them to experience, to know, to walk in it. Romans puts it this way, the author Paul, he says, for from him and through him and to him are all things. To him be the glory forever. Amen. But this begs this question: what is glory? And that's not an easy question to answer. That it's difficult. It'd be similar to me trying to describe beauty to you. And let me compare that even to something relatively easy to describe, like a baseball, rather. If I needed to describe to you a baseball, and you haven't seen one, but all of you have, I would describe, all right, it's this ball. It starts out with this little cork inside, and then they wrap that cork with string, and it's like this sticky rubber type of string. And they just wrap this string over and over and over again until you get a ball that's about the size of a large apple. And they took 2 pieces of leather, and they put it over the ball, and they sew that leather together with this red string, red stitch, so that you have a baseball that you can throw and you can catch and you can play a game with. And in fact, the baseball, it has just a little bit of a bounce, where if you touch it, you can press it just slightly, but not very much, because it's still, like, it's hard. You don't want to get hit by a baseball. Are you guys with me? Are you picturing it? Right? Even when I described the texture or how hard it was, did it take you there to the last time you held a ball? Now let me describe beauty. That's difficult. Like, I could describe to you something that is beautiful. I could describe to you my wife, right? Beautiful. But there's a problem with that, because there are plenty of beautiful people that don't look anything like my wife. And in fact, you don't even have to, beauty isn't dependent on a person. There are things that are beautiful, right? You can describe a piece of artwork. A building can be beautiful. A piece of music. Well, examples in creation, we can point to like seascapes or mountainscapes. All of those are beautiful in different ways. So describing beauty, and like, I can think something's beautiful and you could think it's ugly, right? Now, you would be wrong, clearly, but like, beauty is difficult. You start pointing or seeing things, and glory is closer to that. But here's the problem with glory. We can't just not define it. They say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but glory is not up for interpretation like that. So we have to give it a go. And so I'm going to do that, and I want to approach it the way John Piper does. I really like this when I was researching this and read. And he wants to begin to describe glory by talking about the holiness of God. How many of you have heard about the holiness of God, right? The holiness of God is his unique attributes. And what I'm talking about is holiness is the purity, the beauty, the goodness, the greatness, the worth of God that separates him from all other created thing. It's his distinct goodness. That's his holiness. And God's in a class of his own. So even when I start to describe those things, you might in your mind be thinking of something else that's kind of, well, that's pure or beautiful or good or great or awesome or worthy. But God is in a class of his own. Those things don't even come close. You can point to examples in creation, but they're diluted forms of God's holiness. If you want to think about love and you're thinking about God's holy and perfect love, and you think, man, well, there was that one dad that loved his kid like this. It might be a really powerful way of describing love, but it's just a glimpse of the love God has for you. You could talk about something that's beautiful. You can be talking about, man, when I went into the valley of Yosemite and you see these mountains and these trees and the river and the animals, and it's just the beauty of the whole scene. It might be the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, but it is just a glimpse, a taste of the beauty of God. You see, God put those things in creation to reveal, to give us a little glimpse of who he is, but they will never satisfy. It talks about, I believe in 1 Corinthians, I meant to look this up. I was thinking about it during worship, but that all of this we see through a veil, but one day we'll see fully. That's God's holiness. It's his attributes that are greater than you could ever know, but we just get glimpses of, and they're distinct. They set him apart from all other created thing. In Isaiah 6:3, we get this glimpse into the heavenly scene, and the angels, they're calling out. They say, one called out to another, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. They see God, they see his holiness, and they say, and the whole earth is full of his, they don't say holiness. They say glory. They see God's holiness, and they say, and the earth is full of his glory. You see, God's glory is his holiness displayed. Piper puts it this way: the glory of God is the infinite beauty and infinite greatness of his manifold perfections. Manifold there mean manifested, demonstrated, shown. God is a consummation of every good thing we could know. And the glimpses we do know are because he's decided to reveal those things to us. And that is his glory. That's honestly just the beginning of it. And I want to say this, and we don't have time to go into this to the detail I want, but God is worthy to be worshiped because of his glory, because of his holiness alone. So you just remove everything else. Remove everything he's given you. Remember all the promises. If there was no promise of heaven, there was no promise of blessing here on earth, God would still be worthy of our worship because of his holiness, because of his glory. He is deserving of that. And yet it's because of that glory that we were created. As I said earlier, it's out of his overflow of his glory that he made us. I want to talk real quick about two types of glory. There's God's intrinsic glory. That's his glory, that's his perfect holiness that's not dependent on creation. That's just who he is in his holiness. But it's because of that he wanted to bless others. I think about, if you've ever had something that, man, it is so good that you cannot help but you want to share. This is what gets us in trouble when we're little kids, right? Something happens to you and you're not supposed to tell. Like you get some special treat with your dad or mom and you're like, can't tell my other siblings, and you go tell them as soon as you can. My third kid is so bad at this all the time. Like, because it's so good, you want to share. You taste something, you go somewhere, just some experience, something, and you're like, I have to tell someone, right? Now, we do that here, and often we get in trouble, but God does that, and it was to our favor. It was to our blessing. He was there in all of his glory, and he thought, I need to create something so that they can know this glory. And we were the conclusion there. God created us so that we could be blessed with that knowledge. But his intrinsic glory is not dependent on us, but his manifested glory is how he displays that intrinsic glory in creation and in redemption. At first, it was all about creation. So I'm going to read these two verses again. Before I do that, let's read Psalm 19:1. It says, "The heavens are telling of the glory of God, and their expanse is declaring the works of his hand." Again, I want to reread these. Isaiah 43:7, "Everyone who is called by my name, whom I have created for my glory, whom I have formed, even whom I have made." Romans 11:36, "For from him and through him and to him are all things. To him be the glory forever." That was the intent. That was the purpose. That we were created so that we would know and walk in and experience that glory. And I think about Adam and Eve walking in the garden, and they got a greater glimpse than we've ever known. And then they sinned. And when creation messed it up, this is how Paul puts it in Romans. He says, "For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God." It struck me as I was reading that today. That's the standard that God set. It was for his glory we were made, but it was against his glory that we sinned. They fell short of that perfect, glorious standard. But God, demonstrating his glory further, he provided a way for redemption. And redemption and God's glory is understood most fully through Christ's life, through his sacrifice, through his resurrection. This is how the author of Hebrews put it. He said, "And he, that is Christ, is the radiance of God's glory." The radiance of his glory. I love that. Christ demonstrates that. It goes on. He's the exact representation of his nature and upholds all things by the word of his power. When he had made purification of sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high. So that's all my summary. That's all my intro, rather, to where I want to take this. Don't worry, I hope we're about halfway through this thing so we can get into worship again. But what is our purpose? That's what we're trying to figure out tonight, right? We're in the series. All In is the series. How can you go all in when it comes to community, all in when it comes to discipleship, and all in when it comes to purpose? Well, I want you to know all of this insight is possible because of God's grace, because he has demonstrated his glory through Christ. And our purpose is to respond to that by exalting his glorious name, by enjoying his glory, by being vessels that can further display and bring others to know his glory. Here's the way that they put it in the Westminster Catechism. They said the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. I love that definition. The chief end of man, our purpose, your purpose, my purpose is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. So that's the question. Are you glorifying God? And I want to paint a few different pictures of how we can do this. Because just at the onset, there's this vertical way that we can approach this, where we can glorify God. And we do that, we are just doing it, and we're going to return to doing that in just a minute in worship. We have this opportunity when we worship to come before God and exalt his name and praise him and glorify him. And we're saying, God, I could be doing all these other things. I could be at home watching TV. I could be working. I could be just hanging out with friends. You fill in the gap. I could do all of these things, but I'm choosing to be here to praise your name, to sing these songs, to to lower myself here so that you would be glorified. We do that in prayer. And one of the difficult things about prayer is it's easy when you start learning how to pray to feel like, man, I am talking to a wall. Like, what am I doing? How can I do this? How do people do this for like 3 minutes straight? Like, that's what we've all thought at one point. But then when we picture ourselves and picture that we have an opportunity through our words to glorify God, to step into the very purpose that he created us for, it changes that. Jesus, when he was teaching the disciples how to pray, he said, pray then in this way, our Father who is in heaven, hallowed be thy name. That means make your name holy. May it be lifted up. May your name be glorified. So the first question I have for you tonight is, are you glorifying God in worship and in prayer? And I want to challenge you. If that, you're like, I don't get it. I struggle with that. Then I understand that because I've been there. But I want to challenge you in this. This is a reason you were made. And it's not the only way which we glorify God. But I do know this. If you continue pressing in, if you continue seeking God in this way, making room for him to meet with you in prayer and worship, there's going to come a time when it just clicks, where it becomes something that you not only enjoy. I don't know if this was you, this was me when I was younger. The idea that in eternity we worship God forever was like, I hope they mistranslated that. That idea sounded terrible to me. But I've come to know two things. One, I've come to know that the God that we worship now is just a glimpse of his glory that we're going to be able to worship in presence in heaven. But not only that, but I've learned to love worshiping God. And if you press in, you're going to be pressing into the very purpose that you were made. That's not the only way to glorify God. You could do it horizontally. So there's vertically, God, I exalt you. God, I praise you. Horizontally is when you glorify God in the way that you walk, in the way you talk, in the way you love others, in the way you use your time, your talent, your treasure that he gave you. You have an opportunity to glorify God in all you do. 1 Corinthians 10:31 puts it this way, whether then you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all for the glory of God. And that changes how we do those things. It changes how I work. It changes what music I listen to. It changes these because all of a sudden my audience has changed. And I want to do these things to bring God's name glory, to respond to the goodness that he's shown me. That leads to the second part of that Westminster Catechism. It says the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. How are you doing enjoying God? And does that sound weird to anyone in here, just that concept, that idea? I think for a lot of Christians, it's weird because we don't talk about enjoying God. And often God is like, but he's this maybe he's not a dictator. We're not allowed to call him that because we're still Christians, but he's kind of like that. He should be feared. And we have this fear of the Lord that's good because he's holy, and we should treat him. We shouldn't treat what he tells us to do as suggestions. We need to follow and honor, knowing that he is holy, he is powerful. But we enjoy God when we can rest in that power and it brings security. When we can walk in his ways and it brings peace. I think about, again, when I was worshiping, I'm going through my message and God's giving me different pictures. How many of you guys grew up with a dog, or you have a dog right now? You ever have the dog do something dumb, like it has an accident, and if you're like me, and maybe this isn't good, but it's what I do, you see the dog having an accident, and what do? You yell at the dog, right? Buster, get out of here. And then Buster and runs outside. You're like, that's where you should have been in the first place. You do that, right? And then the dog comes later and peeps its head through the doggy door and comes, and there's like this hesitancy, right? Like, is my master going to beat me? That's what the dog's thinking. And if I'm its master, valid question. So I don't beat dogs, for the record. I don't have any dogs, so. But we approach God like that. Like, many people approach God with this, like, can I get a little closer? There's this nervousness. I'm not sure that am I supposed to be here? Am I allowed to be here? Is this okay? And that's like how we approach Jesus a lot of times. But when the dog, what happens is eventually it gets at a certain spot and you reach out and you're like, it's okay, Buster, I won't kill you. Like, you're cool. Like, you welcome the dog, and then what happens? Like, it all changes. The demeanor changes, and the dog like wags its tail again, and you're homies, and everything goes back to normal. Here's why I bring that up. God wants us to enjoy his presence, and too often we are scared in a way that's not healthy. We need to fear God. We need to respect and honor and recognize that he is God and we are not. His ways are law, our ways are not. We need to understand that. But God's law and his love cannot be separated. When we enter into a covenant with him, that's that perfect combination of those two things. And it's because of his greatness, and it's because that we even know about that we're able to enter into his presence, and it should bring us great security and peace and comfort to know that the God of the universe, who holds all of that power, has welcomed us in fact, has called us, wants us to draw near, and because of that, we can boldly approach the throne of grace, as the author of Hebrews puts it. And what do you do when you get there? Well, I pray this. I pray you would rest. I pray that you would find deep joy. I want you to know satisfaction that can only come from the Lord. Philippians 4:4 puts it this way: rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. James 1:2 says, consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials. I put that one up there for this reason. Even in the difficult times, we can enjoy God. We can find peace in his presence. And then, of course, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace. And there's this idea when, like, you were created because God in heaven, in his glory, said, I want to share my glory with creation, with us. And we are now called, like, we are made for his glory, so we want to exalt his name, but we also want to enjoy him because his glory is good. His glory is great, and it's awesome. In fact, I think about the hunger that some of you felt today when you were fasting. And that desire, like, oh, I want to eat so bad. And everything starts sounding good. Like, even the mediocre stuff. Like, I would chow that so quickly, right? But all of those, they're just hints of the longing that at the end of the day we have for God. God created you for his glory. And there's something in you that will not be satisfied until you enter into his presence. And you can supplicate it with all these other things, but they'll all fall short. You know, we're created to glorify God. We're created to enjoy him forever. And I want to wrap up with this question. Are you living a life that makes others want to know his glory as well? Because I think this is the summation of it. When you live a life that glorifies God and enjoys God, it makes it to where other people want to come and discover and find out what it is that makes you different. 1 Chronicles 16:24 says, "Tell of his glory among the nations, his wonderful deeds among all the peoples." Matthew 5:16, "Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven." My prayer is this, that your life would vertically glorify God, but then horizontally, the way you live would draw others to come to know God in a way that they can glorify him as well. And I was thinking about how to bring a message about purpose. And I think a lot of people want to know, what is my purpose? Like, what is it that I'm supposed to do? Should I be a CPA? Should I be an electrician? Like those types of questions you want to know. And I want to tell you this. There are unique gifts and talents that you bring. Absolutely. But if your aim is to glorify God and enjoy him forever, and you run after him with that mindset, with that goal in mind, then he is going to lead you into those fine details. He's going to direct you along the right path. This is the primary thing, and all other things will be worked out. What is our purpose? It is to glorify God. Can I have the band come up? We've been talking about this series, All In, and community, discipleship, and purpose. And let me tell you this, discipleship, I described it last week. I defined it as being an apprentice to Jesus, right? The goal of discipleship is to become like Jesus. Well, as we do that, not only are we going to glorify God in our lives, but then we're going to effectively help others come to see that as well. I talked about community and what's the purpose. How do we live out community? How do we do that well? Well, community is strengthening one another to grow in discipleship and to accomplish our purpose, which at its core is glorifying God. Here's what I'd like to do. I would like to spend the rest of tonight just worshiping him, just entering into his presence, just leaving room for us to enjoy him. And I want to spend the rest of the night, and it's 8 o'clock, so we have a good chunk of time, entering into the very purpose that God made us. So will you guys do me a favor and stand up? And we're gonna do things a little different, not too crazy, but I do again want to encourage you to move forward if you want to move forward, to put yourself in a position where you really can worship. And some of you aren't moving forward, like you don't want to fill this room, and it's not mandatory, but I really believe God responds to us as we step out in faith. Shane and Chris and I spoke earlier. Here's how we're going to start this second set of worship. Is I want to begin by just resting in God's presence. And here's my prayer. That it would be a joyful rest. That we would be able just to with peace and joy, enter into his presence and seek his face. So Shane's going to strum for a bit. He's going to go into a song about glorifying God's name. But it might take a minute or two. And if you want where you're at, if you want to sit and rest, you can. If you want to stand, you can. Position yourself however you want to. But for the next minute or so, we just want to enjoy the presence of God and just dwell in his glory. Father, I think there's so many things we can get caught up in. Things we need to do. Making sure we say the right things. Lord, I thank you that at the end of the day, Lord, we were created to worship you. And I pray that you would take us deeper. I pray you would help us understand more fully what that means and what that looks like. Lord, you are deserving of our praise. And that's true because of who you are and who you've always been. God, I thank you that that's true, and we have a great picture of why in Jesus Christ. Lord, you created us to know your glory. When we messed it up, you provided Christ to be the bridge. Lord, I don't want to get in the way anymore. So come, have your way. Move freely. To you be the glory.